Hey everyone, I'm your author June. Before we get started, I really would appreciate it if everyone could hit the subscribe button. It helps me grow the channel, and I would love for all of you to come on this journey with me, as a family. Now, let's get into the story. Let me know if you enjoy. The horizon swam before Jed's eyes, a cruel joke of heat and torment. Each inhale rasped like scouring powder, each pulse hammered a painful rhythm against his temples. Days bled together without water, the sun turning his skin into cracked parchment. A searing pulse radiated from the bullet wound in his side, a bitter testament to his errors. Flight had been his only companion, that now even that solace was denied him. His leaden legs betrayed him, collapsing beneath him onto the baking earth. The last thing he registered before oblivion swallowed him whole was the implacable vastness of the Arizona desert. Molly Barnes shielded her gaze, squinting at the shimmering distance. Dust devils were common enough, yet something about the reflection from a far-off object snagged her attention. She'd been coaxing life from the arid soil of her garden, but a prickle of unease had taken root in her. She swiped at the grime on her forehead, smearing it further. "Just a lost heifer," she muttered, but the feeling clung to her. Retrieving her rifle from the fence post, she mentally berated herself. "Fool hen," she chided. But she knew she wouldn't find peace until she investigated. The Bar-M didn't exactly draw social calls, and experience dictated that the unexpected usually spelled trouble. Hiking up her skirt and adjusting her bonnet, she started towards the oddity, rifle ready but relaxed in her grasp. As she neared, the shape resolved into something far more unsettling than a cow. It was a man, prone and unmoving, his clothes stiff with dirt and dried blood. Molly approached with measured steps, weapon raised. A nudge of her boot elicited no response. Kneeling, her weathered fingers sought a pulse at his throat. Feeble, but present. He was younger than she'd guessed, a tangle of dark hair plastered to his brow. His face was drawn, his lips split and crusted. She recognized the gun slung low on his hip, the worn leather and pearl inlay. A harbinger of trouble, without a doubt. Still, he hovered at death's door. Molly cursed softly. She didn't need this complication. Her hands were already full, running the kitchen for a crew of stubborn cowboys on a ranch teetering on the brink. But leaving him to perish wasn't an option. Ignoring her misgivings, despite the alarms ringing in her head, she knew what she had to do. "Damn it all," she grumbled, rolling him onto his back with considerable effort. A groan escaped him, low and raw. She assessed the wound. A ragged entry and exit in his side, the surrounding fabric soaked. He needed a doctor, and quickly, but help was a day's ride distant. She was alone in this. Hauling him back to the ranch was an ordeal. He was heavier than he looked, and the heat pressed down like a physical weight. She dragged him as far as she could, then commandeered his horse for the remainder of the journey. The Appaloosa, a sturdy animal, seemed as depleted as its owner. Back at the ranch house, work ground to a halt as the hands watched. Their curiosity piqued, while Molly wrestled the injured man into her small cabin behind the main house. "What in tarnation, Molly?" arced Hank, the foreman, an aged cowboy with eyes permanently narrowed against the glare. "Found him in the desert," she replied, straining as she maneuvered him through the doorway. "Shot. Needs tending." "Shot," Hank echoed, suspicion tightening his features. "Know who he is?" "Never laid eyes on him," Molly snapped. "You gonna stand there gabbing, or lend a hand?" Hank hesitated, then sighed, resignation etched on his face. All right. But if he makes trouble he won't," Molly retorted. "Now get in here and help me get him onto the bed." Together, they managed to heave the man onto Molly's narrow cot. She shooed Hank out to fetch water and clean linens. Alone with the unconscious stranger, Molly felt a chill creep down her spine. She was playing a dangerous game, sheltering a wounded man with a clouded past. Yet, something about his features, the vulnerability beneath the grime and the stubble, had struck a chord within her. She worked with efficient movements, honed by experience. Frontier life had exposed her to her share of injuries. Cleansing the wound with a blend of water and whiskey, she flinched at his involuntary moan. The bullet had passed through, thankfully, but had left a brutal path. She packed the wound carefully and secured it with a strip of linen. Finished, she sat back, studying his face. Still pale, but his breathing seemed more regular. She dampened a cloth and gently removed the dirt, revealing sharp cheekbones and a resolute jawline. Handsome, in a rough-edged way. She knew better than to get involved. Knew she should hand him over to the law as soon as he was fit enough. But something stayed her hand. Perhaps it was a distant echo of her own history, of being solitary and exposed. Maybe it was simple defiance. Whatever the cause, she couldn't abandon him. She touched the cloth to his parched lips. He stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His gaze was unfocused, clouded with pain. "Where?" he croaked, his voice like gravel. "You're safe," Molly said, her tone softening. "You're at the Bar M Ranch." He blinked, struggling to focus on her face. Who are you?" "Molly," she said. "Molly Barnes. Found you out in the desert." He closed his eyes again, exhaustion claiming him. "Thank you," he murmured, barely audible. "Don't thank me yet," Molly said, her voice regaining its edge. "You've got a long road ahead." She rose and went to the small stove in the corner. She set a pot of water to boil, tossing in a handful of herbs from her struggling garden. She'd brew a broth, something to restore his strength. As she stirred the simmering pot, she glanced back at the man on the bed. He was sleeping now, his face relaxed in slumber. She wondered about his identity, his past, and the reason someone wanted him dead. She knew the truth would surface eventually, but for now, her only concern was keeping him alive. She was a fool, she realized. A soft-hearted idiot with a weakness for strays. But she couldn't change who she was. She was Molly Barnes, eternally drawn to those in need, regardless of the cost. The Barham offered second chances, and this gunslinger was about to get one, like it or not. A debt of honor gold dust motes danced in the sunbeams that pierced the slat curtains, striping the unfamiliar plaster above Jed's head. A persistent throb hammered behind his eyes, a dull counterpoint to the frantic pulse in his ears. He strained to focus, but the room remained stubbornly blurred. The air, thick with the cloying sweetness of lavender, carried another, homely a scent a far cry from the acrid tang of gunpowder and sweat he knew so well. Beneath him, the yielding mattress mocked the memory of the unforgiving desert floor. Fragments of the recent past stabbed at him. The ambush, the white-hot agony in his flank, the creeping despair as life ebbed beneath the scorching Arizona sky. He'd pictured vultures, not this sanctuary. A groan escaped him as he shifted, a searing reminder of the lead slug nestled somewhere within his ribs. Tentatively, he lifted a corner of the heavy embroidered quilt. Beneath lay clean white linen bound tightly around his torso. The wound had been seen to. By whose hand? The door hinges whispered a warning as it swung inward, and Jed instinctively coiled, reaching for a weapon that was conspicuously absent. Molly Barnes filled the opening, a dark silhouette against the bright spill from the hallway. A steaming cup balanced in one hand, the other rested casually on the jamb. The severe gingham dress and tightly braided, auburn hair suggested anything but a ministering angel. More like a schoolteacher about to dole out a harsh reprimand. "Well?" Rip Van Winkle finally decided to join the living. She remarked, her tone tart, though a glint in her eyes hinted at something he couldn't quite place. Was it relief? Exasperation? Perhaps a mixture of both. He sank back against the pillows, the subtle movement sending a fresh wave of agony through his side. "Where am I?" he croaked, his voice raspy from disuse. "The Bar M Ranch," she stated, crossing the threshold. The lavender scent intensified as she approached, an incongruous aroma emanating from such a pragmatically dressed woman. She deposited the mug on the bedside table. "And you're in my guest room. Consider yourself fortunate. Most men left for carrion out in those wastes aren't granted a reprieve." He watched her, suspicion a live wire humming beneath his skin. He was accustomed to inspiring fear, not gratitude. "Why?" he questioned, his voice edged with distrust. "Why'd you bring me here?" She folded her arms, her gaze unblinking. "Don't flatter yourself. I didn't do it out of altruism. I simply couldn't leave you to bake out there." Besides, a flicker of amusement played at the corner of her lips. "The buzzards have been particularly assertive this year." He dismissed the jibe. "What do you know about me?" "Enough," she replied, her voice taking on a harder edge. "I found your sidearm. I've seen the broadsides in town. You're Jedediah Stone. Gunslinger, murderer, and a walking calamity." He offered no denial. "What purpose would it serve? Then why?" "As I said, I couldn't leave you." "But be clear, Stone," she continued, her voice sharp. "You're not calling the shots here. You're on my property, under my roof, and you'll adhere to my rules." He assessed her, searching for a weakness. She was an enigma, this woman. Self-reliant, formidable, and seemingly unimpressed by his notoriety. He was used to getting his way through brute force and intimidation, but he sensed those tactics would be futile with Molly Barnes. "And what might those rules be?" he inquired, his voice carefully devoid of emotion. "First," she began, raising a single finger, "no firearms. Not on this ranch, not anywhere nearby. You're convalescing, not causing mayhem. Second, you'll work. We're short-handed. And you'll earn your keep. Cleaning stalls, mending fences, whatever needs doing. And third," she paused, her eyes boring into his, "no trouble. I run a peaceful operation. I don't need posses or rival gangs descending upon my land. Do you comprehend?" He met her gaze, weighing his options. He was vulnerable, injured, and utterly dependent on her. Resistance was futile. "For the moment. And if I refuse, then you can walk," she said, her voice steely. "Right back into that desert. I'll even point you in the right direction." He knew she was sincere. He was cornered, at least temporarily. He required time to recover, to devise a strategy. "Very well," he conceded, his tone grudging. "I accept." Molly's expression remained impassive. "Good. Now, drink this." She indicated the cup on the table. "It's an herbal infusion. It'll ease the pain." He regarded the dark liquid with suspicion. "What's in it?" "Herbs," she replied evasively. "Things to expedite your recovery. Relax. I haven't poisoned it yet." He lifted the mug, the warmth radiating through his chilled fingers. He took a cautious sip. The flavor was sharp and earthy, yet strangely soothing. He drained the cup, the liquid tracing a comforting warmth down his throat. "Now, get some rest," Molly instructed, turning to depart. "I'll bring you some broth later." "And Stone." She paused at the doorway, glancing back at him. "Don't mistake this for friendship. I'm merely offering you a chance to repay a debt. A debt of honor, you might say. Don't squander it." And with that, she was gone, leaving him isolated in the sunlit room. The lingering aroma of lavender, and the weight of her words, a tangible presence. He closed his eyes, the pain-relieving potion already beginning to take hold. He was a captive, but a captive with a motive. He was indebted to Molly Barnes, and Jedediah Stone always settled his accounts. One way or another. Sharp tongues and simmering stew, the fragrance of sage and slow-cooked something wafted in the air. A stark contrast to the coppery echo of Jedediah's own blood on his tongue. He lay prone, the coarse blanket a reminder against his skin of his precarious position. Molly moved with quiet purpose, a subtle shift in the air, the only warning of her presence. He caught the chime of earthenware, the rustle of linen. "Lie still," she instructed, her tone clipped, businesslike. A cattleman's command, not a nursemaid's gentle coaxing. Jedediah's jaw tightened as she worked the old dressings loose. A searing lance of pain bloomed across his back, forcing a gasp. "Easy, woman," he croaked, his voice a rusty hinge after days of disuse. "Easy's for folks who don't collect lead in their spine," she shot back, her words a sharper cut than any blade. She swabbed at the lacerations with a compress that smelled faintly of vinegar and woodsy herbs. He fought the urge to recoil. "You're fortunate," she conceded, a fraction of warmth entering her voice. "The slug passed clean, could have shattered bone." "Fortune's a stranger to me," he grumbled. Molly scoffed. "Looks like Providence dragged you out of the desert. Most would have left you for carrion." He said nothing, the unspoken debt hanging between them. Admitting it felt like forfeiting a piece of his soul. She completed the cleaning and began to apply a thick, verdant balm. Her fingers, hardened by labor yet surprisingly tender, smoothed the unguent across his ravaged skin. Its scent was grounding, almost soothing. "What is that concoction?" he managed, his voice a thread. "Comfrey and yarrow," came the reply. "An old family cure. Draws out the inflammation, encourages mending." "Inflammation's out," he quipped, a sardonic edge returning. "Just leaves the rot." Molly pressed harder with the fresh bandage, earning a grunt of discomfort. "Don't get cheeky with me, mister. You're hardly in a position to dictate terms." He bit back a retort, focusing on the creak of her chair as she navigated the cramped room. The quiet thickened, laced with unspoken resentments and lingering questions. At last, she broke the silence, her voice a low murmur. "Why were they hunting you?" He tensed. "None of your affair." "Anything that lands on my spread becomes my affair," she countered, steel lacing her words. "You brought disruption here, Jedediah. I'm owed an explanation." He hesitated. The truth was a dangerous commodity, particularly for a woman like Molly. Yet, he knew he couldn't remain under a veil of secrecy. "I used to be a bounty man, skilled at it, perhaps too much so. Made some enemies along the way. Enemies who prefer shooting at backs?" She probed, her gaze sharp. "It's a tangled tale. Times what I have in spades." He exhaled, the air whistling through his teeth. I was a bounty hunter. Good at it. Too good, maybe. Stepped on some toes. Toes belonging to whom? He paused again, his focus riveted to a gnarl in the floorboards. A man named Kincaid. Commands the territory south of the line. Tolerates no rivals. Molly remained silent for an extended moment. Kincaid, she finally uttered, her voice barely audible. I've heard whispers. They claim he's without conscience. Understatement. And he's still pursuing you? Likely. He has a long memory. Molly secured the bandage, her motions economical and precise. She rose and approached the small window, gazing out at the vast sweep of the range. The sun began its descent, painting the firmament in shades of fire and amethyst. You should have perished out there, she stated, her voice devoid of inflection. I can't explain why I burdened myself with you. He shifted uncomfortably on the pallet. Maybe you've got a fondness for strays. She whirled on him, her eyes flashing. Don't presume. I simply have no stomach for seeing a man expire like vermin. But don't mistake charity for friendship. You're still a burden, Jedediah Stone. And I'll maintain a close watch. He met her glare, his own unwavering. I wouldn't have it otherwise. She huffed and pivoted back to the window. Get your rest. You'll need your strength. This place doesn't run itself. She quit the chamber without another word, the mingling scents of sage and simmering stew lingering. Jedediah sank back onto the cot, his body throbbing, his mind a whirlwind. He was stranded, beholden to a woman he couldn't decipher, stalked by a man he couldn't outrun. And yet, in spite of everything, a spark of something unfamiliar flickered within him, a hint of possibility. Later, the door hinges groaned. Molly reappeared, bearing a steaming bowl. She deposited it on a small table by the bedside. Stew, she announced curtly. Eat it while it's still piping. He sat up gingerly, wincing at the protest from his back. The fragrance of beef, root vegetables, and herbs enveloped him. It was the most appealing odor he'd encountered in days. Thank you, he voiced, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. Molly merely grunted. She remained there for a beat, her arms folded, observing him. He lifted the spoon and sampled a mouthful. The stew was robust and flavorful, the meat yielding, the vegetables cooked to perfection. It was sustenance that radiated warmth from the core. He ate in silence, cherishing each taste. Molly continued her silent vigil, her expression enigmatic. When he had finished, he set the bowl down with a soft sigh. That was good, he declared, meeting her gaze. Humph, she retorted. Don't let it swell your head. She collected the bowl and turned toward the exit. As she reached the threshold, she halted. Jedediah, she said, her voice gentler than he'd yet heard. Don't give me cause to regret this. And with that, she was gone, leaving him alone in the small space, the savor of her stew and the weight of her words heavy within him. He realized, with a conviction that settled bone deep, that the course of his life had been irrevocably altered. Finding purpose, the Bar M stirred to life with the dawn, a molten gold wash across the horizon that banished the retreating night. Despite a shoulder still healing from its recent wound, Jedediah Stone was awake before the first rooster's squawk. Molly had tucked him away in a small chamber off the kitchen, more akin to a pantry than a bedroom, yet it offered sanctuary and quiet. He swung his legs over the edge of the narrow cot, the homespun blanket pooling on the floor. A familiar disquiet gnawed at him, and forced idleness was a torment. He discovered Molly amidst a culinary tempest of flour dust and percussive pot clangs in the kitchen. The rich perfume of frying bacon mingled with the robust tang of brewing coffee, a welcome change from the ghosts of gunpowder and blood. She lifted her gaze, a softening gracing her features as she saw him. "Already up? I expected you to sleep half the day away." "Couldn't," Jed rasped, his voice a gravelly murmur. "Thought I'd start earning my keep." Molly arched a brow, a skeptical assessment in her eyes. "You? Earning? Last I recall, your expertise leaned toward lightening wallets, not lining them." "Adaptability is a virtue," Jed riposted, a ghost of a smile flirting with his lips. "Besides, I'm indebted to you, more than I could probably ever repay." Molly scoffed, returning her attention to the sizzling stove. "Don't fret over debts. Just endeavor not to get us all slaughtered." She indicated the doorway with a flick of her spatula. "If usefulness is your ambition, the south fence is an eyesore crying out for repair." Jed nodded, retrieving his hat from a peg. The hat felt different, less a disguise, more a tentative embrace. He stepped into the bracing morning air, the vast Montana sky, a boundless canopy overhead. The Bar M was an expansive enterprise, a tapestry of cultivated fields and rolling pastures stretching seemingly into infinity. The dilapidated south fence was easily located, a pathetic tangle of slumped posts and severed wire. He'd never tackled fence mending before. He picked up a fallen post, examining the fractured wood. Seemingly simple, he mused. He procured a hammer and nails from a nearby shed and commenced the task. The initial nails buckled and bent, stubbornly resisting his efforts. He muttered a curse, frustration escalating. It proved more challenging than anticipated. A presence darkened his workspace. He looked up to find a lean ranch hand named Caleb observing him, a knowing smirk etched on his face. "Struggling a bit there, mister?" Jed grunted, swiping perspiration from his forehead. "Just getting started," he mumbled. Caleb chuckled softly. "Looks like the fence is winning." A stream of tobacco juice painted the dust at his feet. "Here, let me give you a pointer or two." Caleb claimed the hammer, his movements fluid and efficient. He demonstrated how to brace the weakened post, how to correctly angle the nails, the proper technique for tightening the stubborn wire. Jed watched intently, absorbing the lesson. He tried again, mimicking Caleb's practiced motions. This time, the nail found its mark cleanly. "Not half bad," Caleb conceded, a flicker of respect warming his tone. "Not half bad at all," Jed continued. The rhythmic hammer strikes a steady pulse in the morning's quiet. A novel contentment bloomed with each mended section, a sensation foreign to him in recent years. This wasn't the feverish excitement of the chase, the adrenaline surge of impending danger. It was something else, something calmer, more tangible. Later, under the baking afternoon sun, Jed found himself mounted, assisting in the rounding up of stray cattle. He'd ridden extensively, of course, but typically in pursuit of a quarry, the sole objective a swift departure. This felt different. He labored, quote, alongside the other ranch hands, their actions synchronized, their intent as one. A young calf, separated from its dam, veered wildly from the herd. Acting on instinct, Jed spurred his mount, giving chase. The calf proved agile, fleet-footed. Yet Jed proved quicker. He skillfully intercepted its path, gently herding it back towards the other animals. Upon rejoining the group, he detected Molly observing him from afar. Her expression remained inscrutable, yet he imagined a spark of something. Approval, perhaps? That evening, over the dinner table, the ranch hands exhibited less distrust, more acceptance. They shared stories, jokes, even offering Jed a few words of support. He discovered himself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time in what seemed an eternity. After the meal, while clearing his plate, Molly approached him. "You surprised me today, Jedediah," she remarked, her tone unusually gentle. "I underestimated you." "Underestimated what?" Jed inquired, tilting his head slightly. "This," Molly conveyed with a sweeping gesture, encompassing the ranch, the crew, the existence they collectively forged here. "This purpose." Jed scanned the scene, absorbing the tableau. The weathered faces of the ranch hands, the comforting essence of wood smoke, the subtle current of contentment filling the air. He recognized Molly's insight. He had stumbled upon something here, a thing he hadn't consciously sought. A purpose, a justification for remaining. "Maybe," Jed responded, a genuine smile lighting his face. "Maybe I'm only now finding my stride." Night deepened, the stars a diamond dust explosion scattered across the inky void. Jed stood outside the bunkhouse, the cool air a balm after the day's relentless heat. He pondered Kincaid, the relentless bounty hunters still tracking him. Inevitably they would locate him, but for the present, he was here. He was needed. He was a home. Inhaled deeply, the mingled scent of sage and cattle filling his lungs. He carried a debt, a life to construct. And perhaps, just perhaps, a chance at absolution. The prospect evoked equal measures of trepidation and exhilaration. He raised his gaze to the celestial display, a silent oath forming in his core. He wouldn't betray Molly's trust. He wouldn't fail these people. He would safeguard them, even if it demanded confronting Kincaid anew. He would forge a path to make this new reality his own. Whispers of the past the campfire snapped, scattering embers that spiraled like fiery sprites into the black void above. The mingled fragrance of pine needles and wood smoke intertwined with the lingering savor of Molly's stew, a warm shield against the desert night's encroaching iciness. Jedediah settled against a gnarled log, the abrasive texture a stark contrast to the throbbing soreness where the bullet had ripped through. His gaze tunneled into the heart of the blaze. His thoughts, however, chased ghosts across forgotten landscapes. Across the fire, Molly's face, bathed in amber light, revealed the intricate map of lines around her eyes, a testament to resilience and sun-baked toil. She nudged the glowing coals with a branch, releasing a glittering cascade skyward. The silence hung between them, familiar yet thick with unspoken truths. "Ever second-guess anything?" Molly murmured, her words barely audible over the fire's eager consumption of wood. Jedediah understood the question's weight. It wasn't about supper, the weather's temperament, or livestock prices. She was probing the depths of his former life, the one that had delivered him, shattered, to her threshold. He drew in a lungful of crisp air. "Regret is a millstone, Molly," he rasped, his voice rusty from disuse. "Drags you down, hinders every step forward. I try not to linger there." "But?" she inquired softly, her gaze unwavering. He faltered, the past churning like a sandstorm in his memory. Phantoms flickered faces of adversaries, faces of those he'd extinguished. "There are deeds I'm not proud of," he confessed, the words leaving a bitter residue. "Things I'd erase if I could." "But wishing changes nothing, does it?" Molly gave a slow shake of her head. "No, it doesn't. I excelled at it." Jedediah's voice was now barely a breath. "Quick, precise. A talent, of sorts. A means of survival. In that world, you were predator or prey, and you chose the former?" Sometimes, he acknowledged, his eyes hardening. Sometimes choice wasn't an option. He detected a spark of comprehension in her gaze, a glimpse of the harsh realities she knew intimately. Existence wasn't always about preferences. Often, it was a battle for survival. But that's not the man you are now. Is it, Jed? Molly asked, her tone gentle. He scrutinized her face, genuinely seeing the unwavering conviction in her eyes. He perceived the hope she harbored for him, a hope he questioned whether he deserved. I'm striving not to be, he replied, the words stark and honest. The silence returned, qualitatively different this time. It was a silence of shared understanding, of implied promises. Then Jed turned the tables, asking, "What about you, Molly? Ever feel trapped out here?" Molly gazed into the fire's heart, her expression veiled. A dry chuckle escaped her lips. Trapped? This ain't my paradise, Jed. This ranch is all that remains of Pa and my brothers. It occupies my time, fills my belly, but it's not truly living. What occupies your dreams? Jed inquired, genuinely curious. I crave the ocean, Jed. Molly breathed, her voice laced with longing. The tang of salt air, the feel of sand between my toes. I want to see ships charting courses to distant shores, perhaps even embark on one myself. Jedediah regarded her with surprise. He'd always perceived her as the Bar M's bedrock, unshakable and indomitable. He'd never suspected she nurtured such aspirations. Ever been near the sea? He asked. Molly shook her head. Never. Only in the pages of books. Pa always deemed it foolishness, claimed a woman belonged rooted to the land. He was mistaken, Jedediah stated firmly. Molly offered a faint smile. Perhaps. But dreams carry a high price, Jed. And this rancha, well, it requires me. Perhaps. Or perhaps you require it to honor your father's memory, Jedediah suggested gently. But that shouldn't extinguish your own longings. Don't let the past hold you hostage. Molly remained silent for a long while, her gaze lost in the dancing flames. Easier envisioned than executed, Jed. Much easier. Jedediah shifted on the log, the motion sending a jolt of pain radiating through his side. He disregarded it, focusing on Molly. I understand a thing or two about being shackled to the past, he confessed, his voice low. But I'm learning that those chains can be broken. It's a brutal climb, but it's a surmountable one. He reached out, his calloused fingers enveloping hers. Her skin was rough-hewn, weathered, yet her grip conveyed strength. Perhaps, Molly whispered. Perhaps you're right. They sat in mutual silence, punctuated only by the fire's fervent chatter and a distant coyote's mournful lament. Jedediah felt an undeniable connection to Molly, a bond forged through shared adversity and mutual respect. He recognized in her a fortitude he admired, a resilience he envied. And he knew, with startling clarity, that he desired to help her realize her aspirations, just as she was assisting him in charting his own course toward redemption. Eventually Molly squeezed his hand and rose to her feet. Getting late, she said, her voice regaining its customary briskness. Long day ahead. Jedediah nodded, pushing himself upright, the stab of pain a stark reminder of his physical fragility. As they ambled toward the ranch house, he cast his gaze upward, toward the celestial tapestry where countless stars glittered like diamond dust against black velvet. He wondered if somewhere, in that vast expanse, there existed a place where he could truly find liberation, a sanctuary where he could shed his past and cultivate a new existence. A life shared with Molly. A fool's errand, possibly, but for the first time in years, Jedediah dared to entertain the possibility that it might be within reach. He could almost taste the salt-laced air. Shadows-arrived dust devils danced across the baked earth as a lone rider neared the Bar M. He was a figure draped in shadow, his face hidden beneath the brim of a dark hat, radiating an aura of coiled menace. Sunlight flashed from the silver ornaments on his saddle, icy glints that spoke of unspoken threats. His horse, a restless creature, stamped and blew as he drew rein near the bunkhouse, sensing the palpable tension. Two ranch hands, their backs aching from fence work, straightened up, suspicion etching lines around their eyes. The quality of the horseflesh and tack declared this was no ordinary vagrant. Afternoon. The rider's voice grated, a low rasping sound that prickled the skin. Seeking a man. Goes by the name of Stone. Jedediah Stone. The hands exchanged a wary glance. Caleb, the younger, fidgeted, avoiding the rider's steady gaze. "Don't know him," he mumbled. From beneath the hat's shadow, the rider's eyes emerged, dark pools reflecting a chilling lack of emotion. "Spare me the pretense, son. I know he's here. Just point me in the right direction." Hank, the older hand, a weathered veteran, stepped forward, his voice steady despite the disquiet churning within him. "Never heard that name round here, mister." He punctuated his denial with a stream of tobacco juice spat into the dirt, a small act of defiance. A cruel smile twisted the rider's lips. "A pity. I'd hate for things to become unpleasant." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Perhaps the lady of the house might prove more cooperative. He turned his mount towards the main house, leaving the two men watching him, their faces etched with concern. Inside, Molly kneaded dough, a wordless tune escaping her lips. The familiar scent of baking usually brought her peace, but today a prickling unease had taken root. She glanced out the window, her brow furrowing as she watched the rider approach. Something in his bearing, the way he occupied the space around him, put her on edge. She met him on the porch, her arms crossed. "Can I help you?" Her tone was even, guarded. "I'm looking for Jedediah Stone," he stated, his gaze sweeping over her face, seeking any flicker of telltale emotion. Molly's heart lurched, but she schooled her features. "You've got the con." "Wrong place." "Never heard of him." "Don't trifle with me, ma'am." His voice hardened. "I know he's here. A simple conversation is all I require." "Well, he's not here," she retorted, her voice gaining an edge. "And I suggest you leave before I reach for my rifle." A dry, humorless chuckle escaped his throat. A spirited woman. "I admire that, but I am not easily swayed." He leaned against his horse, his eyes fixed on the house, a silent promise of trouble. Molly met his stare, her mind racing. She felt an instinctive aversion to the man, an icy dread that settled deep within her. Jed had a past, a shadowed history he kept locked away. This man was a relic of that past, an omen of looming danger. In the barn, Jed tightened the cinch on a saddle, his movements precise, a deliberate attempt to ground himself. A persistent unease had plagued him all day. His thoughts drifted to Molly, to the shared silences by the fire, to the tentative hope of a future he barely dared to dream of. Leading a horse from the barn, he saw him. A lone figure, silhouetted against the fading light, casually leaning against his horse near the house. Even at this tarry distance, Jed knew him. The distinctive stance, the air of contained menace that clung to him like a shroud. Silas Blackwood. A wave of sickness churned in Jed's stomach, replaced by a chilling premonition. Years had passed since he'd last seen Silas. Years he'd spent trying to forget him. Now, he was here, a specter resurrected from the depths of a buried past. Jed froze, his hand instinctively dropping to the Colt at his hip. But he resisted the urge. A confrontation was unthinkable. Not here. Not with Molly and the others caught in the crossfire. He had to think, had to protect them. He watched as Silas spoke to Molly, his words too indistinct to discern. He saw the set of her jaw, the defiant tilt of her chin. He knew her strength, but Silas was a predator, capable of untold cruelty. Jed cursed silently. He had unwittingly brought this danger to her doorstep, jeopardizing the one place he had ever found solace. He had to act, but how? He retreated into the dim interior of the barn, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting strategies. Flight was no longer an option. He had vowed to stay, to face his demons for Molly's sake. But how could he contend with a demon like Silas Blackwood? A man who knew his vulnerabilities. A man who wouldn't hesitate to destroy everything he cherished. The shadows within the barn seemed to lengthen, mirroring the encroaching darkness that had descended upon the Bar M. Confessions and loyalty. The dust hadn't settled from Silas Blackwood's departure when Jed found himself pinned, not by lead, but by Molly's unwavering scrutiny. She occupied the porch, arms crossed, the sunset staining her features with shades of umber and suspicion. A silent interrogation hung heavy, thicker than the kitchen's smoky aroma. "Inside," she instructed, her tone a low thrum. Jed obeyed, the familiar scent of wood smoke and stew doing little to unravel the tension twisting in his gut. He watched her navigate the room, each movement precise as she tended the fire and poured them both coffee. She set his cup down, the ceramic's click amplified in the stillness. He tasted the brew, the bitter liquid barely moistening his arid throat. He anticipated the reckoning. Her jaw was a rigid line, her eyes held a flinty glint. He'd dodged this reckoning for years, this confrontation with his past and its repercussions. Evasion had only led him here, to her, and he could stall no longer. "That man," Molly initiated, her voice edged with frost. "Blackwood. He knows you, doesn't he? And spare me the denial, Jedediah. I've swallowed enough falsehoods to last a lifetime." He sighed, the sound laden with remorse. "He does. Who is he?" Jed hesitated, grappling with how to articulate the snarled intricacies of his history, the fateful chain of events that had veered him off course. How to convey the choices he'd been compelled to make, the man he'd become. "Someone I used to know. Someone I'd prefer to forget." Molly's snort was humorless. "That's insufficient, Jed." He arrived like a squall, reeking of menace. "He unnerved my crew, unnerved even me. I deserve more than veiled replies." He knew she was right. He owed her candor, even if it shattered the delicate equilibrium they had forged. He placed his cup down, the ensuing quiet ringing in his ears. "My name isn't Stone, it's Jedediah Calhoun." The name resonated, freighted with unspoken implications. Molly's eyes widened slightly, a spark of recognition igniting within them. She knew the moniker. Everyone in the territory did. "Calhoun the Calhoun?" she breathed, barely audible. He nodded, shame flooding him. "The one with the bounty." Molly surged to her feet, her chair scraping against the floorboards, the sound echoing harshly in the small space. She began to pace, her boots drumming a restless rhythm against the wood. "You're a fugitive? You've been sheltering here." deceiving me while the law hunts you. It's not that simple, Molly, he countered, rising. I didn't fabricate everything. I can ride, I can shoot, I can labor. But, yes, I adopted a different name. I had to. Why? What prompted it? He inhaled deeply, bracing himself for the unburdening. I was branded a robber and murderer, a stagecoach job gone wrong. But I swear I didn't do it. The law claims otherwise. The law was misled. I was framed, Molly. I was present, yes, but not the one who squeezed the trigger. I witnessed the perpetrator, but by the time I could speak, everyone was dead, and I was running for my life. Molly ceased her pacing, her gaze fixed on him, her expression a canvas of ambiguity. Why didn't you surrender yourself? Relate what you saw. Because the real killer was powerful, influential. He had the local lawman in his pocket. I wouldn't have stood a chance. I'd be swinging from a hangman's noose right now. He saw the doubt clouding her eyes, the inherent Liz. Disbelief. He knew it sounded like a desperate gambit, the plea of a guilty man. Yet it was unvarnished truth. He'd endured it for years, the crushing weight of the accusation, the constant fear of discovery. I can't simply accept your word, Jedediah, she conceded, her tone gentling slightly. This is my ranch, my existence. I've invested too much to risk it all on a narrative. I understand, he murmured, resignation coating his voice. I wouldn't expect you to. He turned to depart, knowing he must leave, to safeguard her and the Bar M from the peril he'd unwittingly carried in. Where do you imagine you're going? Molly inquired, her voice regaining its sharp edge. He halted, turning to face her once more. Away, before Blackwood returns and unleashes chaos upon you. And then what? You'll simply vanish again? Run and burrow like you've been doing for all these years? What choice remains to me? Molly advanced, stopping only a few feet away. She lifted her gaze, her eyes turbulent with a mixture of anger and something else, something he couldn't quite decipher. You do have a choice, Jedediah, she declared, her voice resolute. You can perpetuate this flight, or you can stay and confront it. You can remain hidden. Or you can strive to prove your innocence. But you won't do so in isolation, not if you don't wish to. He stared, dumbfounded. Molly, I don't comprehend. After all I've disclosed, I'm not naive, Jedediah. I was aware you were withholding. I perceived it in your eyes, in your very bearing, and perhaps I even suspected something of this magnitude. But I also witnessed your work ethic, your treatment of my men, the way you looked at me. She extended her hand, her touch warm on his arm. I've seen genuine goodness in you, Jedediah. I've seen a man striving to become better, and I refuse to allow you to forfeit it because of an event relegated to the past. But the danger... Oh, we'll meet it together. We'll unravel it. I'm not intimidated by Blackwood, nor am I intimidated by the law. Not with you at my side. Her words enveloped him. A surge of relief and gratitude so potent it threatened to buckle his knees. He had anticipated anger, rejection, trepidation. He had braced for her to banish him, to safeguard herself and her ranch. He had not envisioned this. Molly. He choked, his voice thick with emotion. I'm at a loss for words. Say you'll stay. Say you'll fight. Say you'll permit me to assist you in clearing your name. He met her gaze, seeing the strength, the resolve, the unwavering fidelity within its depths. He knew he was unworthy, yet he also knew he couldn't abandon it. Not now, not ever. I'll stay, he affirmed, his voice solid. I'll fight, and I'll let you help me. A faint smile graced Molly's lips. Good, she stated. Now, let's strategize how we're going to extract you from this predicament. He knew the road ahead was fraught with peril. Blackwood was a formidable adversary, and the law a relentless pursuer. But with Molly as his ally, he believed he could face any adversity. He finally possessed something worth defending, something worth living for. He had a chance at absolution, a reprieve, and he had no intention of relinquishing it. The stew continued its gentle simmer on the cook stove as the fire spat and the shadows stretched across the kitchen. Outside, the wind sighed through the prairie grass, bearing the scent of approaching rain and the promise of dawn. But inside, at the very heart of the Bar M Ranch, a different tempest was gathering. A tempest of concealed truths, unwavering allegiance, and a burgeoning connection that held the potential to reshape everything. A tense standoff dust devils danced across the cracked earth, mirroring the turmoil clawing at Jed's insides. Astride a midnight-coated stallion, Silas Blackwood sat just beyond the bar EMS gate, the beast's hooves impatiently scraping the dry ground. No greeting, no dismount. Obsidian shards for eyes. Silas pinned Jed with a look that judged and condemned. The sinking sun bled across the sky in shades of clotted crimson and violet contusions, a bad omen heavy in the air. Calhoun, Silas drawled, the name a venomous rasp. Never pictured you a sodbuster. How quaint. Jed held his ground, a phantom itch drawing his hand towards his holstered revolver. From the porch, Molly's presence offered a curious comfort, a frail bulwark against the brewing storm. The ranch hands, sensing the shift, had coalesced silently, their faces reflecting hard lives and dawning apprehension. Blackwood, Jed returned, his voice a low rumble. You're a far piece from anywhere. Looking for what's mine, Silas countered, his gaze flicking to the ranch house before snapping back to Jed. Or rather, who? Nobody's property here, Jed bit out, jaw tight. Silas emitted a dry, grating chuckle that prickled Jed's skin. Oh, but you are, Calhoun. You're in arrears. A debt long past due. Molly descended from the porch, her voice a honed edge cutting through the tension. He owes you nothing. This is my spread, and you're intruding. Silas's gaze, dismissive and cold, swept over Molly. The hired help speaks. Skedaddle, little lady. This is men's business. A spark ignited in Molly's eyes as she braced her hands on her hips. He's under my protection. You want him. You answer to me first. A surge of protectiveness, fierce and unexpected, washed over Jed. He'd shield her from the mire of his past. Molly, stay out of it. No, she declared, her gaze locked on Silas. This involves me now. Silas sighed with exaggerated wariness. Always the hard way with you, Calhoun. I offered you a choice. Come along quietly, and maybe I'll grease the skids, soften the landing when they hang you high. Hang me for what? Jed challenged, his voice rising in pitch. For something I never did. That's not how the circuit judge sees it, Silas sneered. He sees a robbery, a murder, and a man who lit out running. Looks plenty guilty to me. I was framed, Jed insisted, the words raw with years of bottled-up resentment. You know that. Silas's face remained a mask. Do I? All I know is folks got hurt bad, and you vanished with the strongbox. I didn't take a damn thing, Jed exploded, his control unraveling. It was Devereaux. He set me up. Devereaux is fertilizer. Calhoun. Silas stated without inflection. Can't exactly testify on your behalf now, can he? Your word against a corpse's. Guess who the law's gonna believe? Molly moved closer, her hand a feather's touch on his arm. Her warmth grounded him, a reminder of the life he risked losing. He's telling the truth, Molly insisted, her voice resolute. I believe him, Silas laughed, the sound echoing across the yard like the caw of a carrion bird. You believe him? You barely know him. He's a killer, a thief. Open your eyes, woman. He's playing you for a sap. He's not, Molly snapped back, her eyes blazing. He's a good man, better than you could ever hope to be. Silas's features darkened. That's your final kindness, Molly Barnes. Step aside, or you'll taste regret. Jed knew he couldn't let it continue. He wouldn't allow Silas to threaten her, wouldn't let his past taint the life he was building. Gently, he steered Molly behind him, his gaze riveted on Silas. This isn't her fight, Jed stated, his voice a honed blade. It's between you and me. Precisely, Silas replied, a predatory gleam igniting his gaze. So, are you coming quiet, or are we doing this the hard way? Jed's hand finally gripped the butt of his revolver. The cold steel felt familiar, almost comforting. I'm not going anywhere with you, Blackwood. Not today, not ever. Then the choice is yours. Yes, Silas said, his own hand drifting towards the weapon at his side. Tension crackled, an invisible current surging between them, punctuated only by the stallion's restless fidgeting and the lonely cry of a hawk circling high overhead. There is no choice, Silas, Jed said, his voice tight with suppressed fury. This is a stand. Silas smirked. A cruel and unsettling contortion. A stand you can't win, Calhoun. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. Maybe, Jed conceded, his gaze unwavering. But I'll be damned before I let you haul me off without a fight, and double damned if I let you lay a hand on her. The air hung thick and suffocating. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the yard in long, distorted shadows. The standoff had begun. From behind Jed, Molly spoke softly, her voice laced with steel. He's not alone, Silas. Her hand rested on the rifle she'd retrieved from the house, a tangible symbol of her unwavering support. We all stand with Jed. Silas surveyed the assembled ranch hands, their faces a mask of grim resolve, their hands resting near their own weapons. He had miscalculated, underestimated Jed's newfound allies. So be it, Silas said, his voice laced with venom. You all want to shield a murderer? Fine. You can all burn with him. With a sharp yank on the reins, he wheeled his stallion around, the animal's hooves kicking up a blinding cloud of dust. He didn't flee, however. He halted just beyond the gate, pivoting back to face them, his eyes burning with malignant intensity. This isn't over, Calhoun, Silas called out, his voice riding on the wind. I'll be back, and next time don't expect any offers. He spurred his horse, vanishing into the encroaching darkness, leaving behind a silence more ominous than any shouted threat. The dust settled, yet the tension lingered, an oppressive weight crushing the Bar M. The battle for Jedediah Calhoun's redemption and for the safety of Molly and her ranch had only just commenced. The cook's gambit the dust hadn't even settled from Blackwood's departing wagon wheels before Molly was barking orders. Consuelo, get the men fed. No one's going anywhere on an empty stomach. Then, check the horses, make sure they're ready for anything. Jed, she said, turning to him, her voice softening but no less resolute. We need to talk. She led him, not to the main house, but to the sprawling cookhouse, the heart of the Bar M. The air inside was thick with the aroma of simmering beans and wood smoke, a strange comfort in the face of the looming storm. Molly didn't offer him a seat. Instead, she busied herself at the large cast-iron stove, her movements quick and precise. "Blackwood isn't going to give up, is he?" Jed asked, leaning against a sturdy wooden table, his hand instinctively going to his side, where the bandage was still stained crimson. Molly slammed a pot onto the stove with unnecessary force. "He's got the law on his side, or so he thinks. And men like him don't take kindly to being defied, especially by a woman." She finally turned, her gaze intense, her jaw set. "Running is the only option, Jed, at least for now." Jed's shoulders slumped. "I was afraid you'd say that." "Afraid?" Molly scoffed. "This isn't some dime novel, Jed. This is about survival. Your survival, and by extension, the survival of this ranch. Blackwood comes back with a posse. They won't just take you. They'll tear this place apart looking for you." "So, what's your plan, Molly?" Jed asked, pushing himself off the table and walking towards her, his eyes searching hers. Molly pointed towards a dark corner of the cookhouse. "This place isn't just a cookhouse, Jed. It's got secrets, like everything else around here. My grandfather built it. He was a resourceful man. He didn't trust banks or people. So he built his own hiding places, passages." Jed raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Passages? Leading where?" "Everywhere," Molly said with a sly grin. "The root cellar, the stables, even a hidden exit that leads into the arroyo a good mile from here. Enough to get you a head start." "You're serious about this?" Jed asked, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "Deadly serious," Molly said. She walked over to the corner and, after a moment of fumbling, pressed a seemingly random brick in the wall. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage. The air that rushed out smelled of damp earth and secrets. Jed stared astonished. "I'll be damned." Molly grabbed a lantern from a hook and lit it, the flickering light casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls of the passage. "This way," she said, stepping inside. Jed followed, his hand brushing against the cool stone. The passage was cramped, barely wide enough for one person. The air was thick and still, a stark contrast to the bustling cookhouse they had just left. "How long have these been here?" Jed asked, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Decades," Molly replied. "My grandfather used them during the war, smuggling supplies. They've been gathering dust ever since. Until now, I suppose." They navigated the passage, turning corners and descending a short flight of stone steps. The air grew colder, and the smell of earth became stronger. Finally, they emerged into a small, musty chamber. "This is the root cellar," Molly explained, gesturing around the room. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of preserved fruits and vegetables. A trapdoor in the floor led to another passage. "The trapdoor leads to the stables. From there, another passage to the arroyo. It's not exactly comfortable, but it's discreet." Molly paused. "You'll need supplies." They spent the next hour gathering what Jed would need for his escape. Molly was methodical, packing dried meat, hardtack, a canteen filled with water, and a bedroll. She also included a map of the area, marking the safest routes and known water sources. "This rifle," Molly said, handing him a Winchester. "It's my father's. It hasn't been fired in years, but I cleaned it up. You might need it." Jed took the rifle, his fingers tracing the worn wood. "I appreciate this, Molly, more than you know." "Don't mention it," Molly said, avoiding his gaze. "Just be careful out there, Jed, and don't do anything stupid." "I'll try my best," Jed said, a wry smile playing on his lips. As Molly gathered more supplies, Jed noticed her movements were jerky, and she avoided eye contact. "Molly, are you sure about this?" Molly stopped and turned to face him, her expression troubled. "No, I'm not sure about any of this. What I am sure about is that Silas Blackwood is a snake who won't quit until he gets what he wants, and I won't let him use you to hurt the Bar-Am." She reached into a small wooden box and pulled out a handful of bullets. "Here, don't waste them." She handed him the bullets, her fingers brushing against his. The touch sent a jolt through him, a reminder of the connection that had grown between them. "Thank you, Molly," Jed said softly. "For everything." Molly nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Just go, and stay safe." With a final look at Molly, Jed slung the rifle over his shoulder, grabbed the pack of supplies, and disappeared into the passage leading to the stables, leaving Molly alone in the root cellar, the flickering lantern casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. She stood there for a long time, listening to the silence, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Rallying the troops, the dust hadn't even settled from Jed's departure when Molly gathered the ranch hands. They stood awkwardly in the fading light of the bunkhouse porch, their faces etched with a mixture of concern and apprehension. She planted her feet, her gaze sweeping over each man, meeting their eyes with a resolve that belied the tremor in her heart. "Blackwood's coming back," she stated, her voice carrying the weight of the impending storm. "He wants Jed, and he won't care who he has to go through to get him." A murmur rippled through the group. Old Man Hemlock, the grizzled horse wrangler, spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "Figured as much. That hombre looked like trouble rolled in a snakeskin." "Jed's gone," Molly continued. "He's using the passages. But Blackwood won't just take my word for it. He'll tear this place apart looking for him." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I won't lie to you. This could get ugly. Real ugly." Young Billy, barely a man with peach fuzz on his chin, shifted nervously. "Ma'am, with all due respect, Jed's a gunslinger. A wanted man. Why are we risking our necks for him?" Molly's gaze softened slightly as she looked at the boy. "Because," she said, her voice firm, "he's more than just a gunslinger. He's worked harder than any man I've ever seen. He's earned his keep, and he's become one of us. Besides," a hint of steel entered her voice, "I won't let some snake like Blackwood dictate who I call family on this ranch." She looked back at the others, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm not asking anyone to do anything they don't want to. If you want to ride out, I understand. No hard feelings. But if you stay to fight. You stay to protect this ranch and everything we've built here." A long silence hung in the air. The only sound was the chirping of crickets in the approaching night. Then Hemlock stepped forward, his weathered face set in a grim line. "I ain't riding nowhere, Molly. This ranch is all I got, and I ain't about to let some lowlife take it away. And," he hefted his rifle, a Winchester that looked as old and worn as he was. "Besides, I owe Jed one. He saved my hide from that rogue grizzly last spring." One by one, the other ranch hands followed suit. Even young Billy, his initial apprehension replaced with a newfound resolve, squared his shoulders. "I'll stay," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but firm nonetheless. "I might not be much of a fighter, but I can load a rifle faster than anyone you've ever seen." A wave of relief washed over Molly, but she knew this was just the beginning. "All right," she said, her voice regaining its strength. "Then let's get to work. We don't know when Blackwood will be back, but we need to be ready." The ranch hands moved with a newfound purpose, their initial hesitation replaced by a shared sense of duty. Henlock took charge, barking orders with the authority of a seasoned veteran. "Billy, you and Jose get up to the ridge and keep watch. Give us a warning if you see anyone coming." He turned to the others. "We need to barricade the doors and windows. Make sure everything's locked down tight." Molly led the way to the barn, where they stored the ranch's meager arsenal. Old rifles, shotguns, and a few rusty revolvers were pulled from their dusty corners. The air filled with the metallic tang of gun oil as they cleaned and loaded their weapons. "We're going to need more ammunition," Molly said, rummaging through a wooden crate. "And anything else we can use for defense." She found a box of dynamite, left over from a previous attempt to clear some stubborn rocks from the north pasture. A dangerous idea sparked in her mind, but desperate times called for desperate measures. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the Barham Ranch transformed into a makeshift fortress. Barricades were erected, windows were boarded up, and traps were set. The ranch hands, their faces grim but determined, moved with a quiet efficiency, their actions fueled by a mixture of loyalty, fear, and a fierce determination to protect their home. Molly stood on the porch, surveying their work. The ranch looked different, fortified and braced for a fight. She knew they were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing a ruthless enemy. But as she looked at the faces of the men who stood beside her, she felt a surge of hope. They might be just a handful of ranch hands, but they were her family. And they would fight for each other, for their home, and for the chance at a peaceful life. The smell of gunpowder mingled with the scent of wood smoke in the air, a grim reminder of the battle to come. The quiet of the evening was broken only by the creak of the wind in the eaves and the distant howl of a coyote. Molly gripped the rifle in her hands, her knuckles white. She knew that Blackwood was coming, and she would be ready. She would defend her ranch, her people, and the memory of the man who had shown her that even a wounded heart could find a reason to beat again. The thought of Jed, somewhere out there in the darkness, fueled her resolve. She wouldn't let Blackwood take away the chance at a future, not for Jed, not for herself, and not for the Barham. Firestorm at the Barham, the first shot cracked the dawn silence, a jagged tear in the fabric of the fa. Morning. It splintered the wood of the bunkhouse door, sending a shower of sharp fragments into the already tense air. A heartbeat later, the valley erupted. It wasn't a battle, it was a firestorm. Molly, perched atop the water tower, with a rifle cradled in her arms, saw the first wave of Blackwood's men spill from the tree line. They were a motley crew, faces hard and desperate, the glint of sun on their gun barrels a deadly promise. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the sound echoing across the ranch, a defiant roar answering Blackwood's challenge. A figure stumbled, clutching his leg, and went down. Below, Jed exploded from the barn, a Winchester rifle in his hands. He moved with a speed that belied his recent injuries. A ghost from his past resurrected in the face of present danger. "Ranch hands, hold the line!" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the din. "Don't let them reach the house!" The ranch hands, armed with a mix of rifles and shotguns, had taken positions behind overturned wagons, the woodpile, and the sturdy stone walls of the blacksmith shop. Young Billy, barely a man, trembled as he leveled his father's old shotgun. Next to him, grizzled old Jebediah, a veteran of more battles than Billy had seen sunrises, spat tobacco juice and aimed with a steady hand. Blackwood's men surged forward, firing wildly. Bullets whizzed past, kicking up dust and splintering wood. A window shattered in the main house, the sound like a fragile promise broken. Molly adjusted her aim, picking off another attacker who was trying to flank their position. "Damn you, Silas Blackwood," she muttered under her breath. "You picked the wrong ranch to mess with." Inside the house, Maria, the cook, was barricading the doors and windows with furniture. She clutched a heavy cast-iron skillet in her hands, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "Come on, you mangy coyotes," she muttered. "I've got a special recipe waiting for you." Jed moved like a whirlwind, firing, reloading, and directing the ranch hands. He knew these men, their weaknesses, their strengths. He'd trained them, taught them to shoot, to defend themselves. Now, they were putting that training to the test. "Hold your fire," he yelled. "Make every shot count." A figure emerged from the tree line, tall and menacing, silhouetted against the smoke-filled sky. Silas Blackwood. He raised his rifle, his eyes fixed on Jed. "Jedediah Stone," he roared. "Your past has come calling." Jed returned the glare, his face grim. "It's over, Silas," he shouted back. "Go home." Blackwood laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "It's never over, Jedediah. Not until one of us is dead." He fired. The bullet whizzed past Jed's head, close enough to feel the heat. Jed dropped to one knee and returned fire. The battle raged on, a chaotic symphony of gunfire, shouts, and explosions. One of Blackwood's men managed to reach the barn and tossed a Molotov cocktail inside. The dry hay ignited instantly, sending flames licking up the walls. The horses screamed in terror. "The barn!" Jed yelled. "Someone get the horses out." Several ranch hands broke cover and raced towards the burning barn, braving the hail of bullets. They managed to open the stalls and drive the terrified animals out into the open. One of the men, young Billy, was hit in the arm, but he kept running, urging the horses to safety. Molly watched in horror as the barn burned, the flames reaching higher and higher, casting a hellish glow over the ranch. She knew they couldn't hold out forever. Blackwood had more men, more ammunition. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they wouldn't give up. This was their home, their family. They would fight to the bitter end. Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the ground. Blackwood's men screamed as the wagons they were using for cover erupted in flames. Jed had rigged them with dynamite, a desperate gamble that had paid off. The explosions scattered Blackwood's forces, creating chaos and confusion. Taking advantage of the lull, Jed rallied the ranch hands. "No!" he shouted. "We hit them hard. We show them what the Bar M is made of." With a renewed sense of determination, the ranch hands charged forward, firing as they ran. They met Blackwood's men head-on, a whirlwind of fists, bullets, and steel. Molly, still on the water tower, provided cover fire, picking off anyone who tried to flank them. The fight became a brutal, close-quarters brawl. Men wrestled on the ground, knives flashed, and fists flew. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, smoke, and blood. Jed fought like a man possessed, his past fueling his rage. He moved with a deadly grace, a dance of death honed over years of violence. He saw Blackwood in the distance, reloading his rifle. Jed charged towards him, his eyes fixed on his target. Blackwood saw him coming and raised his rifle, but Jed was too fast. He dove to the ground, tackling Blackwood and sending him sprawling. They wrestled on the ground, locked in a desperate struggle. Blackwood was strong, but Jed was fueled by adrenaline and a burning desire to protect Molly and the Bar M. He landed a blow to Blackwood's jaw, sending him reeling. He scrambled to his feet, grabbed Blackwood's rifle, and smashed it against a nearby rock. Blackwood staggered back, his face contorted with rage. "You can't win, Jedediah," he snarled. "You're a wanted man. They'll never let you go." Jed stood over him, his chest heaving. "I'm not running anymore, Silas," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is my home, and I'm going to defend it." He raised his fist, ready to deliver the final blow. But then he hesitated. He looked at Blackwood, defeated and broken, and saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear. Regret. He lowered his fist. "Get out, Silas," he said. "Get out and don't ever come back." Blackwood stared at him for a long moment, then slowly got to his feet. He turned and limped away, disappearing into the smoke and chaos. Jed watched him go, his heart heavy. He knew this wasn't the end. Blackwood would be back. But for now, the Bar M was safe. He turned back to the ranch, his eyes scanning the scene of devastation. The barn was still burning, the smoke billowing into the sky. Men lay wounded on the ground. Molly was climbing down from the water tower, her face grim. He walked towards her, his body aching, his soul weary. He knew he had brought this violence to the Bar M, had endangered everyone he cared about, but he also knew that he would do it again. He would fight to protect them, no matter the cost. Molly met him halfway, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and concern. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines of worry etched into his skin. "Are you all right?" she asked. Jed nodded, his voice hoarse. "We made it," he said. "We survived." Molly looked around at the ravaged ranch, at the wounded men, at the burning barn. "Did we?" she asked softly. "At what cost?" Molly's fury, the acrid smell of gunpowder, hung heavy in the air. A stark reminder of the battle that had just ripped through the Bar M. Molly surveyed the scene, her heart a tight knot in her chest. The barn was a smoldering skeleton against the twilight sky, the air thick with the scent of burnt hay and desperation. Jedediah Stone, his face grim and smudged with soot, was barking orders, coordinating the weary ranch hands as they began the grim task of assessing the damage. But Molly wasn't tending to the wounded, she was reloading her shotgun, the click of the mechanism echoing the steel in her eyes. "Molly, darlin', what do you think you're doing?" Jed called out, his voice rough with concern. Molly turned, her gaze unwavering. "Making sure they don't come back, Jed. And if they do, they'll find a less welcoming surprise." She hefted the shotgun, its weight familiar and comforting in her hands. It wasn't just a weapon. It was an extension of her will, a symbol of her determination to protect what was hers. Jed started towards her, a frown etched on his face. "That's my job, Molly. You need to be inside, patching up the wounded. Your job?" Molly spat, her voice sharp. "This is my ranch, Jedediah. My family built it from nothing. I'll be damned if I let some lowlife like Blackwood burn it to the ground while I sit inside knitting." She pointed the barrel of the shotgun towards the horizon, her jaw set. "Besides, I'm a better shot than half these fellas." Before Jed could protest further, a figure darted from behind the charred remains of the barn, rifle raised. It was one of Blackwood's men, a desperate straggler who'd likely been left behind in the chaos. Jed reacted instantly, drawing his revolver, but he was too slow. Molly moved with a speed that surprised even herself. She raised the shotgun, aimed, and fired in a single, fluid motion. The blast roared, deafening in the sudden silence that followed. The attacker stumbled, his rifle clattering to the ground as he clutched his shoulder, a crimson stain blooming on his shirt. He let out a pained grunt and scrambled back into the shadows. Jed stared at Molly, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and admiration. "Damn, Molly," he breathed. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Molly simply shrugged, ejecting the spent shell and reloading with practiced ease. "Learned from my PA. He always said a woman should know how to handle a gun, especially in these parts." She glanced at Jed, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Looks like his lessons paid off. The ranch hands, who had witnessed the entire exchange, erupted in cheers. "Atta girl! Molly!" one of them yelled. "Show 'em what you're made of," another chimed in. "Blackwood won't be back any time soon after that." The show of support seemed to embolden Molly. She stood taller, her shoulders squared, her gaze sweeping across the surrounding landscape. "All right, listen up," she shouted to the assembled ranch hands. "We've taken a beating, but we're not beaten. We'll rebuild the barn, stronger than before, and if Blackwood or anyone else thinks they can come here and take what's ours, they've got another thing coming." She paused, her eyes locking onto Jed's. "Jedediah, you take point on the perimeter. Make sure there aren't any more surprises lurking in the shadows. The rest of you, let's get those wounded inside and see what we can salvage." As the ranch hands scattered to carry out her orders, Molly turned back to Jed. "You all right?" she asked, her voice softening. "You took a nasty fall back there." Jed nodded, wincing slightly as he moved his shoulder. "Just a few bruises, nothing I can't handle." He looked at Molly, his expression earnest. "But Molly, you can't keep putting yourself in danger like that. I can't lose you." Molly stepped closer, her hand reaching up to touch his cheek. "You won't lose me, Jedediah. I'm not some damsel in distress. I can take care of myself. And I can take care of you too." She paused, her eyes searching his. "We're in this together. Remember?" Jed covered her hand with his grip firm. "I know, and I'm grateful for it. More than you know." He hesitated, then added, "But Molly, this ain't over. Blackwood won't let this go. He'll be back, and next time he'll be even more ruthless." Molly nodded, her expression hardening once more. "Then we'll be ready for him. We'll be ready for anything." She pulled her hand away and walked towards the ranch house, her shotgun held firmly in her grasp. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard, painting the scene in hues of orange and red. Molly's figure, silhouetted against the fiery sky, seemed to embody the spirit of the Bar M. Resilient, defiant, and ready to fight for what was hers. She knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but with Jed by her side and the loyalty of her ranch hands, she was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The fury in her heart burned bright, a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. The truth revealed the cold bit with teeth that morning, a raw, pre-dawn chill laced with the scent of charred wood and soaked earth. Jed, Winchester firm in hand, stood sentinel at the barn's edge. He felt Blackwood and his cadre pressing close, carrion birds circling a dying beast. Inside, Molly ministered to the injured, her expression a mask of fierce determination. He'd begged her to flee, to find sanctuary elsewhere, but those implacable eyes had met his, and she'd declared, "This is where I belong, Jedediah. I'm staying put." A creak of leather, hushed voices they were tightening the noose. He spat, the taste as acrid as his fear. The hour of reckoning had arrived. A lone rider materialized from the gloom, backlit by the nascent sun. Blackwood, his features carved with cruel satisfaction, halted his mount, the beast stamping with impatience. "Well, Jedediah," he drawled, the sound amplified by the stillness. "Fancy finding you here. Thought you'd have flown the coop." Jed leveled the Winchester the barrel unwavering. "It ends now, Silas." A harsh, grating chuckle escaped Blackwood. "Ends? It's only warming up. You think a woman and a scattering of farmhands can shield you? Always were a simpleton, Jed." A gloved gesture brought his men slinking from the shadows, a motley line of bristling steel. "They ain't hiding." Molly's voice sliced through the tension, sharp as a honed blade. She emerged, shotgun cradled in her arms. "They're defending what's theirs." Surprise flickered across Blackwood's face. "Molly Barnes, always had a weakness for lost causes, didn't you? Shame you picked such a worthless one." Jed ignored the bait, focusing on the icy glint in Blackwood's eyes. "Why this, Silas? After all this time?" The cruel smile vanished, replaced by a glacial stare. "You know damn well why, Jed. Don't feign innocence. You were always too pure, too righteous, too blessed." "The bank robbery, Silas. You framed me." Jed's voice was a low growl. "Framed you?" Blackwood played the innocent, but his eyes betrayed him. "I simply guided the law towards the obvious suspect. Fastest draw, deadliest shot. Who else would they suspect? You craved the money." "The money was a mere trinket, Jed. What I truly desired was to see you humbled, to witness that halo of righteousness crumble as they hauled you off in irons. And I almost savored it." "Why?" "We were brothers, Silas. We were brothers. Rode, we bled together." Disbelief, a profound ache, colored Jed's words. "Brothers?" Blackwood spat again. "Never. You were the darling, the admired one. I was perpetually in your shadow, and the resentment festered. Unspoken animosity crackled, a tangible thing." Jed lowered the Winchester a fraction, his gaze locked on Blackwood. "It didn't have to be like this, Silas." "It was inevitable, Jed. Survival of the fittest. And I intend to prevail." Blackwood spurred his horse, drawing his revolver in a flash. Reacting instinctively, Jed dropped the rifle and drew his Colt. But Blackwood was a fraction quicker, the bullet singing past Jed's ear. Jed stumbled, then steadied himself, returning fire. The bullet found its mark, Blackwood's horse, which screamed and bucked, unseating its rider. Blackwood landed heavily, scrambling to his feet, his face a storm cloud of fury. Discarding the useless revolver, he lunged at Jed, fists clenched, a human battering ram. Jed met him head-on, a savage, desperate clash. Blows rained down, each impact echoing with sickening force. Pain lanced through Jed's ribs, his shoulder throbbed, a legacy of previous battles. Blackwood was physically larger, bolstered by years of simmering rancor. But Jed possessed something Blackwood lacked, the resolve to protect what he held dear. He ducked under a haymaker and connected with a bone-jarring blow to Blackwood's jaw. Blackwood staggered, momentarily dazed. Jed exploited his advantage, unleashing a barrage of punches, each fueled by betrayal and suffering. Blackwood roared, a primal sound, and charged, driving Jed to the ground. They wrestled in the dirt, a desperate struggle for control. Blackwood gained the upper hand, pinning Jed beneath him, fist raised for the final strike. Jed writhed, bucking Blackwood off balance. He scrabbled upright, body screaming, face bruised and bleeding. Blackwood rose slowly, eyes reflecting a mix of hate and disbelief. "You should have stayed down, Jed," he rasped. "I'm not surrendering," Jed declared, fists clenched, eyes burning. Blackwood charged again, but Jed was prepared. He sidestepped the assault and delivered a crushing blow to Blackwood's temple. Blackwood crumpled, unconscious. Jed stood over him, chest heaving, body shaking. He could have ended it, erased Blackwood from existence. But he refrained. He was done with that life. He turned to Blackwood's men, who watched in stunned silence. "Take him and vanish," Jed commanded, his voice firm yet measured. "And never darken my doorstep again." Hesitation flickered across their faces before they slowly rallied around their fallen leader. They hauled him onto a horse and retreated, casting apprehensive glances at Jed. As they rode off, Jed knew a reckoning was coming. Blackwood would seek vengeance. However, for now, he was victorious. He had protected his home, his chosen family, his chance at a new beginning, and that was enough. He turned towards the barn, where Molly awaited, her face a portrait of worry. He walked towards her, his body battered, his heart whole. The road ahead would be arduous, but he knew he wouldn't traverse it alone. He had Molly, and he had the Bar M, and that was all that mattered now. Justice, not revenge. The revolver slipped from Silas's numb fingers, a muffled clatter in the dust. Jedediah nudged it further with his boot. The sound vanished in the oppressive stillness engulfing the ranch yard. Silas, gasping, pinned him with a gaze rife with disbelief and simmering, impotent fury. Crimson trickled from the gash on his temple, blurring his vision. Yet he remained unbowed, no plea on his lips. A vanquished wolf, he stood his ground. "Why?" Silas croaked, the word a venomous whisper. "Why didn't you finish me?" Jedediah returned his pistol to its holster, the click cutting through the air. He studied Silas, truly seeing him, beyond the man who'd plundered his life, a gaunt, ravaged figure. He registered the gnawing bitterness, the festering envy, the self-directed hate that had poisoned all he touched, and felt a chill pity, an unwelcome guest in his heart. "Because," Jedediah said, his tone level and resolute, "your death wouldn't resurrect my father. It wouldn't rewind the years I spent on the run. It wouldn't undo a single thing." He paused, his gaze hardening like flint. "But letting you live? That's a deliberate choice. You'll answer for your crimes, Silas. Not through vengeance, but justice." Silas spat, the bloody globule landing scant inches from Jedediah's boots. "Justice? In this peasant community? You're a simpleton, Jed. Hopelessly naive. They'll only see what I want them to." "Perhaps," Jedediah conceded, "but I'll gamble on their perception. I'll trust in the truth, however faint." He inclined his head towards the house. "Molly and the others, they recognize the man I am today. That's paramount." Silas's eyes narrowed to slits, focusing on some phantom point far beyond Jedediah. "You imagine you've changed? That you can simply cleanse away the blood, Jed? It's coursing through you. It's ingrained in your being." "It's who I was," Jedediah countered, his voice firm as iron. "I'm neither running nor concealing myself any longer, Silas. Nor will I permit you to steer my course." He advanced, his shadow enveloping Silas. "Now, depart my property." Silas remained rooted, defiant even in defeat. "This isn't concluded, Jed. Remember my words." Jedediah sighed, the sound a burden lifted from his chest. "It is for me. I'm finished with you, Silas." He turned his back and walked towards the house. Each stride was measured, each movement broadcasting his newfound resolve. He sensed Silas's gaze boring into him, but he didn't waver, didn't yield. He kept walking. The drumming of approaching hooves became audible, crescendoing swiftly. The sheriff, just in time. Sheriff Brody, his face a road map of sun and worry lines. Testament to years policing a town that constantly pushed its boundaries, hauled his horse to a dust-billowing stop. With an almost jaded glance, he absorbed the scene, Jedediah's calm stance, Silas's venomous rant, the toppled wagon, the acrid smell of gunpowder still clinging to the air. "What's the commotion, Jedediah?" Brody inquired, his voice gravelly but impartial. He kept his hand close to his sidearm, a subtle advisory. "Silas sought trouble, Sheriff," Jedediah responded evenly, "and he found it." "Is that a fact, Blackwood?" Brody redirected his attention to Silas, his gaze unwavering as granite. Silas, still incandescent with rage, attempted to gather himself, to project an air of injured innocence. "He's lying, Sheriff. He assaulted me. He's a fugitive, did you know? A bank robber. Uses the alias Jedediah Stone." Brody's eyes flickered toward Jedediah, a silent query hanging in the air. "Is this accurate, Jedediah?" Jedediah held the sheriff's gaze, unflinching. "It's true I was branded a bank robber. It's false that I committed the crime. Silas is the architect of my downfall." "Framed him?" Brody arched a dubious brow. "That's a heavy allegation, Blackwood." "He has no evidence." Silas spat. "It's his word versus mine." "I do have proof." A new voice sliced through the fraught air. Molly emerged from the ranch house, her features set in a determined cast, clutching a time-worn leather pouch. "Silas dropped this while skulking around earlier. It holds the money he used to buy off the witnesses back in Redemption. Jed ordered me to safeguard it, just in case." Silas's face drained of color. He surged towards Molly, but Jedediah intercepted him, barring his way. "Don't even contemplate it, Silas," Jedediah warned, his voice a suppressed growl. Brody dismounted, his movements economical and decisive. He seized Silas by the arm, wrenching it behind him. "That's sufficient, Blackwood. You're accompanying me." "You can't do this," Silas protested, struggling against the sheriff's hold. "He's the true criminal." "We'll untangle it all at the jailhouse," Brody stated, his voice immutable. He shot Jedediah a look, a spark of something akin to respect glinting in his eyes. "Thanks, Jedediah, for resolving this peacefully." As Brody escorted Silas away, the ranch hands shuffled out of the barn, their faces etched with conflicting emotions, relief and lingering apprehension. They regarded Jedediah with renewed respect, acknowledging the courage he had displayed not in claiming a life, but in preserving one. "Molly Prash," approached Jedediah, her eyes searching his. "Are you unharmed?" He nodded, a subtle smile gracing his lips. "I am now." He took the pouch from her, their fingers brushing. "Thank you, Molly, for trusting in me." "I always will," she replied, her voice a steady whisper. "Now, let's head inside. I anticipate a long night of explanations." As they walked towards the house, Jedediah cast a final glance at the receding figure of Silas, a minuscule, insignificant speck swallowed by the immense prairie. He felt neither triumph nor gratification, only a profound sense of release. It was finished, or, at the very least, one chapter was irrevocably closed. The future, Croc, remained opaque. But for the first time in years, Jedediah felt the flicker of hope igniting within him. He had chosen justice over retribution, and in doing so, he had initiated the process of true healing. The scars of the Cars are past might never entirely vanish, but they no longer dictated his existence. He was Jedediah Stone, rancher, friend, and a man resolved to sculpt a future worth defending. And with Molly at his side, he felt equipped to confront whatever lay ahead. A crossroads dust devils pirouetted across the baked earth, mirroring Jedediah's inner turmoil. He leaned against the bunkhouse porch, his gaze fixed on Molly. She was near the corral, her denim skirt flaring as she tended to a mare's fresh wound. The waning sun gilded the auburn strands of her hair, creating a luminous aura. He rationalized his watchfulness as concern for her safety, now that Blackwood was behind bars. But the truth ran deeper. He'd witnessed her ferocity, her steel-edged spirit, her fierce protectiveness. He'd also seen the compassion in her gaze, her tender words for the animals, the quiet fortitude she exuded when the world threatened to crumble. And he'd felt the electric jolt of her touch, a warmth that had penetrated his calloused heart and begun to melt the glacial residue of his past. A week, 7 days since Silas had been hauled away. A week since Jedediah had stood in that sun-scorched street, confronting the specter that had haunted his sleep and made his stand. A week since he'd opted for justice over vengeance. The wheels of the law had turned with surprising speed, largely due to Molly's compelling testimony and the evidence she had painstakingly gathered. Jedediah Stone was no longer hunted. He was unbound, free to vanish. The notion reverberated in his skull, a hollow, disquieting echo. He was a transient, a gunslinger accustomed to violence and solitude. He didn't belong in this sanctuary of peace, alongside this woman who had somehow managed to breach his defenses. He pushed off the railing, his hand instinctively going to the familiar weight of his gun belt. He needed to ride, to taste the wind, to feel the horse's powerful stride, to lose himself in the immensity of the plains. He craved escape from the stifling praw, sense of belonging, the terrifying bloom of a hope. Inside the hushed stable, he saddled Shadow, his loyal Appaloosa. The horse nuzzled him, and Jedediah stroked its velvety neck. "Easy there," he rumbled, his voice thick with unspoken pull. "Emotion. Just gotta clear my head." Leading Shadow out, he noticed the ranch hands congregated near the water trough. Their conversation ceased as they saw him, their expressions a complex blend of respect and something he couldn't quite place. Jedediah, Mateo, the ranch's patriarch, called out, his lined face breaking into a smile. "We wanted to thank you." Jedediah frowned, puzzled. For what? For everything, Mateo gestured to the group. For saving the ranch. For bringing things to right. "It was Molly," Jedediah countered, shrugging it off. "She did the lion's share." Molly's got backbone," Mateo conceded. "But you stood shoulder to shoulder with her. You shielded her. You showed us the meaning of fighting for what we hold dear." The other men murmured their agreement. Even young Billy, who typically shunned Jedediah, offered a shy smile. "We're glad you stayed," he mumbled, scuffing the dirt with his boot. A knot tightened in Jedediah's throat. He was unaccustomed to gratitude, to feeling valued. His life had been defined by fear, suspicion, the desolate isolation of an outlaw. "I just did what needed doing," he said, his tone rough. "Maybe," Mateo said, his eyes twinkling with knowing. "But you could have ridden off any time." "You didn't. And we're beholden to you." He clapped Jedediah on the shoulder, then rejoined the others heading towards the bunkhouse. Jedediah stood for a moment, the weight of their appreciation settling on him. Mounting Shadow, he rode towards the rolling hills marking the ranch's boundary. The sun dipped towards the horizon, igniting the sky with a riot of fiery hues. He urged Shadow into a gallop, letting the wind scour his face, trying to outpace the turmoil within. Reaching the crest of a hill, he paused, gazing back at the Bar M ranch. From this vantage point, It resembled a refuge, a fragile pocket of civilization amidst the unforgiving expanse. He could discern a wisp of smoke curling from the chimney of the main house, the faint glimmer of lamplight spilling from the windows. He pictured Molly inside, preparing supper, her brow furrowed in concentration, the hint of a smile playing on her lips. He squeezed his eyes shut, attempting to banish the image. He couldn't stay. He couldn't permit himself to become ensnared. His past was a menace, forever poised to resurface and shatter everything she had painstakingly built. Yet, the prospect of leaving, of never seeing her again, felt like a shard of glass lodged in his heart. For so long he'd fled his past. He'd forgotten the ache of longing, the fragile promise of hope. Now, he stood on the precipice of discovering something worth defending, something worth remaining for. He opened his eyes, his gaze returning to the ranch, the decision a crushing weight on his soul. He stood at a crossroads, torn between the shadows of his former life and the fragile dawn of a future he dared not believe he deserved. The choice was his. But he knew, with chilling pain, certainty, that more than just his fate hung in the balance. Hers did too. And the thought of jeopardizing her happiness was almost unbearable. He wheeled Shadow around, heading back towards the ranch, the lengthening shadows of the setting sun stretching before him like grasping claws. He remained uncertain of his course. He didn't know if he could ever truly outrun his demons, but one thing was clear. He could no longer run. He must confront his past, face his fears, and make a stand. A choice that would dictate not only his destiny, but that of the woman he was beginning to. He choked off the thought mid-bloom. He couldn't afford to entertain such notions. He couldn't allow hope to take root. It was too perilous. But as he rode back to the bar image of Molly's face, her eyes radiating both warmth and strength, remained indelible. And he knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that regardless of his decision, his life would be irrevocably changed. A leap of faith, the ghost of Woodsmoke clung to Jedediah, a phantom embrace from countless nights spent pondering by the bunkhouse blaze. He discovered Molly wielding a scrub brush against the cookhouse table's scarred surface, the setting sun gilding the room in horizontal bars of tar. Light, a low thrum. The ranch's working pulse resonated in the air, a familiar hum that stirred something deep within him. "Evening, Molly," he rumbled, the sound unusually resonant in the confined space. She glanced up, her features softening as their eyes met, her labor-roughened hands pausing their work. "Jedediah." "Didn't hear you. You've become quite the shadow lately." A faint smile played on her lips. More so than usual, anyway. He leaned against the doorframe, the aged planks a cool counterpoint against his back. "Been turning things over in my head." "A perilous occupation for a man of your proclivities," she quipped. The warmth laced her tone. She resumed scrubbing, the rhythmic scrape filling the quiet. "About what comes next," he clarified, pushing off the frame to approach her. "Now that things have calmed some." He made an indefinite gesture, failing to convey the tangle of anxieties and budding hopes roiling inside him. Molly halted again, setting the cloth down with deliberate care. Turning fully, her blue eyes held his with, quote, "unwavering intensity." "And what conclusions have these ponderings yielded, Jedediah?" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. The unspoken truth weighed on him, a gamble he wasn't sure he was prepared to take. "I could just vanish," he blurted, the words sharper than intended. "Find some place where no one knows my face, knows what I've done." A fleeting shadow of pain crossed her face, quickly veiled by her characteristic composure. "That's always been your escape hatch, hasn't it?" "Flight." It was. he conceded, his voice barely audible. But things have altered. He searched her gaze, seeking some reciprocal spark, a hint that she felt the same magnetic pull. Molly took a step, shrinking the space between them. The mingled aromas of lye and wildflowers swirled around him, a potent cocktail that quickened his pulse. Altered how, Jedediah? He swallowed hard, the words finally liberated from their cage. Because of you, Molly. Because of this place. He swept his hand, encompassing the cookhouse, the ranch, the life he'd stumbled into. I never imagined belonging. Yet here I feel a kinship. Her expression softened, her eyes reflecting depths previously unseen. And where do I figure into this, Jedediah? Do I warrant a place in your future? The question hung, heavy with unspoken yearning. He reached out, his calloused fingertips tracing the delicate curve of her jaw. Molly, you are my future. Or you could be, if you'd have me. A solitary tear escaped, tracing a glistening path down her cheek, and she made no move to intercept it. Oh, Jedediah, she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. You infuriating, complicated man. Haven't you realized? I've been halfway gone on you since the day I hauled your sorry hide out of that ditch. The confession struck him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. He had allowed himself a sliver of hope, but hadn't dared to truly believe. Molly, she covered his hand with hers, their fingers interlacing. I was afraid to speak, afraid to frighten you away. I knew you were contemplating leaving. A watery laugh escaped her. Foolish, wasn't I? Not foolish, he countered, his voice raw. Brave. More brave than I deserve. He drew her close, enfolding her in his arms. I'm not going anywhere, Molly. Not without you. She nestled against him, her body trembling slightly. Promise me? I promise, he vowed, his voice resonant with conviction. The running stops now. I'm staying right here, with you. He lowered his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss. Both tender and urgent. A kiss that whispered of shared pain, newly found hope, a future forged together, one moment at a time. A kiss that sealed a covenant, a plunge into the unknown. As the kiss intensified, Jedediah felt a sense of serenity he hadn't known existed. The weight of his past hadn't vanished, but it felt diminished, manageable. He knew challenges lay ahead, shadows from his past might yet emerge, but he wasn't alone anymore. He had Molly, and the Bar M. He had a purpose, a reason to stay put. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Molly gazed up at him, her eyes shining with tears and an unyielding love. So, what now, Gunslinger? She queried, a playful spark dancing in her eyes. He grinned, a genuine, heartfelt smile transforming his features. Now, he declared, we build a life, together. He recognized the path wouldn't be smooth. He anticipated obstacles, hardships, moments of wavering. But he also knew that with Molly at his side, he could surmount anything. He had discovered redemption, not by outrunning his history, but by embracing his future, a future constructed upon love, trust, and the indomitable spirit of the Bar M Ranch. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the cookhouse in long, retreating shadows. Jedediah looked at Molly, at the ranch beyond the window, and realized he was, at long last, home. He'd taken the leap, and he was ready to soar. Home is where the heart is. The dawn arrived, crisp and clear, painting the Montana sky with strokes of rose and amber. Jedediah was up before the sun kissed the horizon, a lifelong habit etched into his bones from years spent skirting danger. But this morning hummed with a different sort of energy. The weight that had been crushing him had dissipated, replaced by a lightness he hadn't dared to imagine. He found Molly already in the kitchen, the tempting scents of coffee and sizzling bacon weaving through the air. She looked up, her gaze meeting his with a gentle smile. "Morning, sleepyhead," she greeted, her voice a warm current that swept away the last shadows of night. He lingered in the doorway, observing her fluid movements as she navigated the kitchen. "Morning," he responded, the word feeling both unfamiliar and welcome. He inhaled deeply, steeling himself. "Molly," he began, pushing away from the frame. "About last night." She paused, spatula suspended in mid-air, her attention fixed on him. "Last night was a surprise," she admitted, a flicker of apprehension dancing in her eyes. He moved closer, shortening the distance between them. "A surprise, but not unwelcome," he countered, his voice a soft rumble. He reached for her, gently, enfolding her hand in his. "I meant what I said. I'm staying." Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a spark of hope igniting within their depths. "Staying?" she echoed, her voice barely audible. He nodded, offering a reassuring squeeze. "Staying. Here. With you. At the bar M. I can't promise it will always be smooth sailing, Molly." "My past," she interrupted him, covering his hand with her own. "Your past is just that, Jedediah. It doesn't define who you are. What matters is what you choose to do, who you choose to be." He gazed at her, his heart overflowing with an unutterable gratitude. He felt unworthy of such unwavering faith, such absolute acceptance, but he had no intention of letting it go. "Then I choose to be here," he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "I choose you, Molly." A solitary tear traced a path down her cheek, which she brushed away with the back of her hand. "Good," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Because I choose you too, Jedediah Stone." The ranch pulsed with renewed vitality. Jedediah dove headfirst into the work, his hands finding solace and direction in repairing fences, tending to the livestock, and restoring the aging structures. He was no longer merely a hired hand. He was a partner, a guardian, an integral part of the Bar M. Molly worked alongside him, her spirit an endless wellspring, her laughter a constant reminder of the joy he had rediscovered. Their days were filled with sunshine and physical labor, their evenings spent sharing tales and aspirations beneath a starlit canopy. The other ranch hands, initially suspicious of Jedediah's presence, gradually warmed to him. They witnessed his tireless efforts, his unwavering dedication to the ranch and to Molly. They saw the tenderness in his gaze when he looked at her, and they recognized him as one of their own. The Bar M began to undergo a metamorphosis. What had once been a struggling, dilapidated ranch began to thrive. Jedediah's sharp skills with a rifle proved invaluable, safeguarding the livestock from predators and discouraging any unwelcome intrusions. Molly's cooking, always exceptional, seemed to reach new levels of culinary brilliance. The tantalizing aromas of her meals drifted on the breeze, attracting travelers and neighbors from miles around. The Bar M evolved into a sanctuary, a place where people could find delicious food, good companionship, and a sense of community. One evening, as the sun sank below, the mountains, painting the heavens in vibrant shades of orange and purple, Jedediah and Molly sat on the porch, watching the horses graze serenely in the meadow. "Do you remember when you first found me?" Jedediah asked, his voice hushed. Molly chuckled softly. "How could I possibly forget? You were a disaster. Half dead, stubborn as a mule, and twice as dangerous. And yet you still took me in," he responded, shaking his head in disbelief. "Why?" She shrugged, a playful spark in her eyes. "Someone had to. Besides," she added, her voice turning serious, "I saw something in you, Jedediah. Something worth rescuing." He reached for her, clasping her hand in his. "You rescued me, Molly," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a second chance, a reason to exist." She squeezed his hand, her eyes locking with his. "We salvaged each other, Jedediah. We nurtured this together." He surveyed the ranch, taking in the flourishing livestock, the meticulously maintained buildings, the smiling faces of the ranch hands. It was more than just a ranch, it was a haven. It was an emblem of hope, of affection, restoration. "Home," he murmured, the word feeling both foreign and intimately familiar on his tongue. "Home is where you hang your heart." Molly smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "That's right, Jedediah. And my heart resides right here, with you." As the stars began to shimmer in the inky sky, Jedediah knew that he had at long last discovered his place in the universe. He was no longer a scarred gunslinger, tormented by the ghosts of his past. He was Jedediah Stone, a rancher, a protector, a lover, a cornerstone of the Bar M, and a man finally at peace. He belonged here, with Molly, forging a future brimming with love, laughter, and the promise of a brighter dawn. The past might still cast a long shadow, but he felt ready to confront it, knowing he would never have to face it alone. He had Molly, and he had the Bar M. He had a home,